You're looking at the Oregon Court of Appeals ruling released this morning that says Measure 114 does not violate the Oregon Constitution, but it won't be taking effect anytime soon. More on that later. This ruling is the latest in a string of court decisions that have plagued the voter-approved measure ever since its razor-thin passage in the November 2022 election. First, though, a refresher on what Measure 114 would do. Then we're going to dive into what comes next and the reaction pouring in today. Measure 114 would change three things. It limits gun magazines to hold 10 rounds of ammo or fewer. It requires a permit to buy a gun and a safety class to get that permit. It also keeps the gun from being given to a buyer until after a background check is finished, closing the so-called Charleston loophole. Currently, there is no limit on the size of a magazine, no permit required for purchase, and the gun can be given to a buyer after 3 business days, even if the background check is not yet finished. It's also important to note the ruling today comes out of the state case regarding Measure 114 in the Oregon Constitution. There's also a federal suit playing out regarding the measure and the U.S. Constitution. In that case, a federal judge already ruled that 114 is constitutional, but it's expected that case will be appealed and potentially end up before the Supreme Court of the United States at some point down the line. But today, we're focused on the state case. The appeals court evaluated whether Measure 114 is a reasonable regulation to promote public safety without unduly frustrating the right to bear arms in the Oregon Constitution, which is Article 1, Section 27. And it reads, "Right to bear arms, military subordinate to civil power. The people shall have the right to bear arms for the defense of themselves and the state, but the military shall be kept in strict subordination to the civil power." In the ruling, judges write that Measure 114 does not unduly frustrate that right to bear arms, concluding that all of Measure 114 is, quote, facially constitutional, meaning in their focus on the text of the measure itself, it does not violate the state constitution.
As to the permit to purchase and background check requirements of Measure 114, the court ruled that those two requirements are reasonable legislative responses to identified public safety concerns stemming from dangerous and untrained individuals obtaining and using firearms without appropriate firearm safety training. Because the court viewed Measure 114 and those aspects of it as a reasonable legislative response to promote public safety without sort of unduly burdening the right to bear arms, the court found that those two portions of Measure 114 are constitutional. As to the large capacity magazine ban, the court ruled that this too is a reasonable legislative response to identified public safety concerns, this time stemming from the advancements in firearm technology and the availability of those advancements to the general public, which have created observable threats to public safety.
Okay, hopefully you followed that. Certainly a lot of legal terms there, but that's sort of an explanation of the court's ruling by an attorney who supported Measure 114. We also heard from the lead lawyer for the plaintiffs in the case, the group who thinks 114 is not constitutional and that it infringes on Oregonians' rights to bear arms.
Rights are in and of themselves inalienable, and you do not have to seek permission from the government prior to exercising a right. This is akin to saying that you need a permit to exercise your religion in your home, or to speak freely in your home, or to perform any of your constitutionally guaranteed rights within your home, on your property, on the property of others. It's quite invasive. We already have a permit to own, purchase, and possess firearms, and it's Article 1, Section 27 of the Oregon State Constitution. So to require a further grant of permission from the government is a grave infringement on that constitutionally guaranteed right.
The Oregon Senate Republican caucus released a flurry of statements today, including this one. Measure 114 is an alarming attack on the constitutional rights of responsible Oregonians. It was poorly conceived from the start, creating a bureaucratic nightmare for law enforcement and infringing on the rights of law-abiding gun owners. The measure does nothing to address crime, hold criminals accountable, or improve public safety. Attorney General Dan Rayfield released a statement of his own, writing, "Oregonians voted for this, and it's time we move ahead with common sense safety measures. We know there will be a lot of conversation around this, but the bottom line is that we're committed to protecting the rights of responsible gun owners while doing what we can to reduce gun violence." So what is next for 114? The plaintiffs have just over a month to file a petition of review, basically an appeal, to the Oregon Supreme Court, asking them to look at the case and decide on whether it's constitutional or not. The plaintiffs' lawyers says they'll do just that.
Both the trial court, Court of Appeals, and both sides cited the same quotations from the same cases. So that's indicative of the case law underlying Article 1, Section 27 being bad case law that needs to be revisited by the Oregon Supreme Court. And that's part of the reason why we intend to appeal this decision.
Once that appeal is filed, it could go two different ways from there. The Oregon Supreme Court could simply say, no, we won't review it, and the current Court of Appeals ruling would stand, potentially allowing Measure 114 to take effect. Or the state Supreme Court could decide to take the case and review it and issue a ruling of their own, likely several months down the line. Now, if that happens, whatever the state Supreme Court says is the final word, so to speak, as far as the state case is concerned. Now, we'll be waiting to see what happens there, as well as if the federal case heads to an appeal, which could drag this out for months or years to come. Well, now it's your turn to weigh in. Do you think Measure 114 violates the right to bear arms under the state constitution? Do you want 114 implemented? Why or why not? Email us the story at kgw.com or call and leave a voicemail 503-226-5090. Or as always, you can hit us up on social media.